Check 1, 2, 3. Good evening, everybody. Well, good evening. Good morning. My heavens, I think I've gotten a little bit out of time here. Good morning and welcome to the channel. I'm Brian Lusk. We got a lot of stuff to go over from the last couple of days in the Ukraine war. I am outside today. There is wind, and I'm expecting the church bells to go off any moment now, which will happen about every quarter hour, and I'll have to pause when that does happen because they are loud as they're right across the street. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and get started with what's going on. And I've kind of done some extra measures here to try and be prepared here. For instance, I've wrapped a little bit of noise canceling stuff around my microphone. Um, so there is all that going on. We've got just a ton of things going. In the meantime, let's go ahead and get rolling here. Ozzy, glad to see you. And Al, absolutely good morning to you. Hopefully no power outages today. That last stream was quite the... Oof. It looks like I might be able to get away with talking during it. It looks like it's my filters are getting most of it out. So I'm going to go ahead and continue on. You'll probably hear it in the background. Let me know how bad it is when you do. Anyway, so let's go ahead and get started here. We've got, let's see, let me flip around here to the proper browser. There we go. All right, let's see. We'll start off with this message from Spravdi, the Stratcom Center. This would be I believe, a government account for, well, government, not sure it's actually run by the government per se, but it is very much a pro-Ukrainian government account. From Lexington to Yorktown and from Kyiv to Kherson, the battle for liberty and the defense of the common values shared by members of the free world against tyrannical foreign empire continues. The people of Ukraine would like to congratulate our American partners on this special day, celebrating almost 250 years of the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for which your ancestors fought so heroically. We thank the American people for your support in our own 1776 and wish you a happy 4th. I actually put out my little brief statement on the 4th of July, which was just basically happy Independence Day to the greatest experiment in government through freedom and the freedom of the individual. And government by the people and for the people. So this is a wonderful experiment in how things can possibly be for those who are freedom-loving, freedom-seeking, and willing to effectively be as self-governing as possible. From the Kyiv Independent, one of their writers gave their social media manager, gave an op-ed here stating, "I love America and I know we can do the right thing. My biggest fear is that we'll simply choose not to, and the consequences will follow us for generations to come." Here's the thing, and the U.S., as they've said, I think it was the Brits who said, or at least one of their prime ministers said, the Americans will always do the right thing after they've done everything else first. And there's a lot of truth to that. During World War II, there was a huge America First movement, which should sound familiar to anybody who's familiar with American politics at this point in time. And that America First movement was an isolationist one. They were not, I mean, there were aspects of it that were pro-German, there were aspects of it that were pro-Nazi, there were aspects of all of it that were actually very much isolationist. However, once the attack on Pearl Harbor happened, after the U.S. was going through this isolationist phase, the U.S., even that America First movement said, nope, the time for this is over. Let's all, pull together here and start actually fighting this war. And that's when the real work started by America to join World War II. I suspect we are seeing something very similar happening today. This America First movement that is isolationist, that does not believe the U.S. has a role to play in the world, but only a role for itself. But America is not a selfish nation, not by nature. And by and large, even with the reduced amount of religiosity, for lack of a better term, there is still a fundamental generosity, fundamental sense of justice that Americans maintain. And I believe that in the end, we will find our justice and our mercy, and we'll move forward. Luciano, glad to have you on board as well. Always glad to have everybody here today. We got quite the crew already starting off. From Anton Herischenko, this poem, this woman, this old teacher from Toretsk, read a poem with the truth about Russia. And let me see if I can back this up, and I'll read it to you as it goes across here. Russia, when will we be free of your embrace, so obsessively intrusive that one can suffocate in it? When will we ever be free of your vile invasion, country of darkness, prison, and brazen insinuations? When will you leave us, wolf in lamb skin? You swore eternal friendship, and chickens are laughing at that friendship. You brought deadly tears to our God-given land. You have deprived people of their homes and sowed seeds of discord. When will you get out and take your thieves with you, so that this insolent and terrible death does not hover over Donbass? We don't believe you anymore, Russia. You can't deceive us a second time. Sowing the winds, get ready to feel the storm. Quite the statement there by that teacher. This is a poem that expresses their frustration. And the thing about Russia is that if they were a good neighbor, a friendly country, somebody who is doing good things in the world and for their own people, the odds are there'd be a lot of those nations there in Eastern Europe that would voluntarily have interactions with Russia. Ukraine would have been one of them before 2014. They would have if Russia had not been invading its neighbors and causing trouble, they would have absolutely had the opportunity to have that friendship blossom. And then people would want to be their friend, not afraid to be their neighbor. Let's go ahead and move on to, I guess I'm going to call it negotiation right now. Viktor Orban did meet with President Zelensky just the other day, and immediately took off and headed to the Kremlin to meet with Vladimir Putin. Yeah, this is some people are mocking this in various ways, saying that he's going to go and get his paycheck. And the truth is that in many ways, Viktor Orban is working towards Russian goals here. From the way he's working it. Then, of course, he comes out with this statement. I was in Kyiv this week, and now I am in Moscow. I realize that Ukraine's and Russia's positions are very far apart. Gee, I think that's pretty obvious. Ukraine's position is really straightforward. All Russians out of, Russian soldiers out of Ukraine's sovereign borders. Russia's position is also pretty straightforward. Ukraine gets no sovereignty. They are entirely subject to our whims. And we'll talk about some of those details as we go on. They've got their latest batch of demands here. There's nothing surprising in it, so you will not be shocked at all when we go through it. Vladimir Putin claimed that Russia is ready for negotiations regarding Ukraine, but on the basis of the Istanbul agreements, the ones that never took place, and taking into account the new realities. So let's unpack that a little bit. There are three pieces of the puzzle in Putin's statements: alleged readiness to negotiate, his repeated demand to go back to the Istanbul talks, and the new realities on the ground. Let's take it step by step. And by the way, I am reading Daniel Sezlagowski. I apologize, Daniel, but he's the head of Eastern European Program and Senior Research Fellow on Ukraine, Polish Institute of International Affairs. So this isn't me talking, this is him. But I think what he says is very good. Putin claims once again that Russia is ready for negotiations regarding Ukraine. He keeps presenting himself as the party supposedly willing to end the war, while blaming Ukraine for prolonging it. So is Putin really open to discussion? Let's take a closer look at the conditions he sets. He refers to the Istanbul agreements, which include the Istanbul communique and much hyped Ukraine-Russia talks, which never came to any conclusion, though, regardless of what Putin claims. What does it mean in practice? Putin says he would negotiate provided we accept his demands from March to April 2022, which entail far-reaching disarmament of Ukraine, curtailment of its sovereignty, and sanctioning of the Russian influence on the internal politics of Ukraine. Basically, they'd have almost no military, no ability to resist Russian aggression. They would have absolute, really basically would end up with a puppet government in Ukraine, for what there is of it. In other words, Putin says he is ready to get back to the discussion about Ukraine's surrender, as if it were still March or to April 2022, and the Russian troops were stationing on the outskirts of Kyiv. Even then, Ukraine was not willing to accept the Russian conditions, not to mention that it has carried out 2 successful counteroffensives since then in the north and south of the country. So we're clear? That is oh, dang it. I can't believe I've forgotten the names. Kherson's one of them. The other one was in the north, and if it comes back to me, I'll mention it later. These were very successful counteroffensives, taking back large portions of the captured territory. So anybody who says that Ukraine has not carried out a successful counteroffensive is not looking at the facts, just so we're clear on that. Is this what Putin has in mind when he refers to the new realities? On the contrary, what Putin understands as new realities is his demand to recognize the Russian annexation of 4 Ukrainian regions in the autumn of 2022. Putting all 3 pieces of the puzzle together, Putin says he is ready for negotiations regarding Ukraine only if these negotiations lead to the incapacitation of Ukraine, along with its partition. To put it simply, Putin wants Ukraine's capitulation, nothing short of that. So what does he want? He wants to torpedo the Ukrainian Peace Summit initiative in Switzerland. And I believe that is the short-term goal. They want to specifically end any possibility of the Switzerland Peace Summit coming to any kind of larger scale peace solution. Because the more the international community comes up with their own solutions to the situation, the harder it will be for Russia to demand that their proposed solution be carried out. So this might be intended to torpedo those efforts and end them from the perspective of the international community. Second, he already positions himself in case Donald Trump wins the U.S. presidential election. As KT McFarland said at Strategic Art Conference a few weeks ago, Trump would call Putin and ask if he wants to negotiate. If not, then Trump would unleash massive sanctions on Russia. The problem is Vladimir Putin always says he's willing to negotiate on his own terms, not on anyone that's actually acceptable to anybody but Vladimir Putin and those who support Vladimir Putin. Third, Putin believes, not without reason, that baited by promises of negotiations, the West will reduce its military support for Ukraine, allowing Russia to continue bleeding out the Ukrainian army and its civilian population. Putin's words should therefore be read not only his stubborn unwillingness to negotiate the end of the war, but in fact as an escalation of his demands, which now includes sanctioning the partition of Ukraine. For Putin, any negotiations regarding Ukraine constitute war by other means, which shall allow him to achieve his war objectives through political process, thereby reducing the cost of subjugating Ukraine militarily, the cost he is willing to bear anyway. So, in other words, as Anton Hershchenko puts it here, or quoting Putin himself, the conditions for ending the war involve the complete withdrawal of all Ukrainian troops from Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics, the Zaporizhia and Kherson regions. There are other conditions, but these are all subjects for fairly detailed consideration during possible joint efforts. So they want Ukraine to give up territory that Russia has never held during this war. Even Erdogan offered to mediate some peace talks here, trying to power broker this thing, but Vladimir Putin ruled that out. He's got Viktor Orban working his angles right now, and Erdogan's a little bit too friendly at different times with the West. So he's definitely not on board with having Turkey take it over. Then President Zelensky called on Donald Trump to reveal his top secret plan for ending Russia's war against Ukraine so that Ukraine can be prepared for any risks such a plan might entail. If Trump knows how to finish this war, he should tell us today. Let me see. I think I've got it here. Bear with me a second here. Okay. I think I've got this somewhere else, but if I do, we'll touch on it then as well. Here's the thing. Zelensky wants to know if, come the presidential election, come January 20th, 2025, if Ukraine will have a strong partner in Ukraine in the United States, or if Ukraine will have to go it alone compared to the U.S. The Europeans want to know much the same thing. And that's the challenge that they're facing. They are not expecting Donald Trump to suddenly miraculously get Vladimir Putin to pull all of his troops out of Ukraine. Quite the opposite. But either way, they are wondering if they'll have a reliable partner in winning this war and then winning the peace afterwards. That is the question. I'm not going to say one way or another because Donald Trump changes positions like I change socks. So moving on from that, let's go ahead and keep going. Well, pausing for one moment, there are indications that Donald Trump would support Ukraine. But I've got to wait until there's real evidence because, like I said, he changes his positions on a regular basis. Reality will be very different. The Ukrainians' ministers of parliament dismissed Trump's NATO peace plan rhetoric. That's because Trump doesn't provide specifics, just that he says he's going to do it somehow. However, Zelensky did give a little bit to Russia in this regard, saying that the representatives of the Russian government should be present at the second peace summit. But not likely to be Vladimir Putin, he said, because he's afraid to leave his country at this point in time, at least not to go to one that might have him arrested. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg did state that Viktor Orban is not representing NATO in these meetings with Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. He's representing his own country, not NATO. I welcome the fact that we have found a way to avoid any blockages from Budapest to more support from NATO to Ukraine. Hungary has subscribed to and agreed on many strong statements from all NATO allies condemning the invasion of Ukraine by Russia and reiterating our support to Ukraine's territorial integrity. So there's a lot of factors there with Orban and all this kind of thing. Anton Hershchenko, though, sums it up quite simply. Putin is probing the EU, NATO, the West. He is looking how far he can go and which of the 1,000 cuts might work. It is crucial that the response to this is strong and clear Not deep concern, but decisive actions. Then, of course, Russia pulled out of the OSCE. We mentioned this in the previous video. They pulled out claiming that the Baltic states were primitive. Dmitry, at War Translated, came back and said, "What exactly is primitive about the Baltic states? Especially coming from a country that decided a full-scale war would be appropriate action in the 21st century versus actually making your country successful and likable by your neighbors and drawing them closer through positive means." That's the thing I started off the stream with. If Russia would actually do things to make the world better, would do things that were good for their country, make their lives better, and help out other countries, and not try to invade countries and to overtake the world in their power grabs, there's real indications that they could have had great partners in Europe and great partners in Africa and the Middle East who would be happy to join up. Not just the dictators of the world, but the democracies of the world, the ones that have the long-term ability to make the difference in this world. People would want to be Russia's friend if Russia was a good friend. And from Hans de Vries, I'm sure I've mispronounced that one, who's a Dutch journalist, retired. With Viktor Orban systematically undermining the unity of the European Union, there may come a point at which European Union member states of NATO might end their solidarity with Hungary. Supporting an ally in need in Article 5 situations is not a treaty obligation, it's voluntary. Saying that if Hungary is going to keep going on to Vladimir Putin's side in all of this, they might find themselves alone if things go south for Hungary. And that's kind of everything on the negotiations front that I've been kind of touching on a little bit here and there. Orban's trip is interesting, and I would really love to know his true motivations. I suspect that he wants to be seen as a peacemaker, as a power broker. And the problem is that he's trying to be a peacemaker and a power broker between two sides that have no overlap on what they're willing to accept for peace. The Ukrainians aren't going to stop until they have their territory. The Russians aren't going to stop until they run out of equipment or a certain individual is no longer in power. It's crazy. One side could end this war today. Just walk their butts right out of Ukraine. That's all they'd have to do. The other side could capitulate entirely. But if there's not one of those two things happening, there will be no peace in Ukraine. Speaking of Ukraine, let's go ahead and move forward with the news out of Ukraine itself. Russia attacks port facilities near Odessa, killing 1 and injuring 7. There was another bit of information that came out about this, and that is that 3 young women were arrested by Ukraine's security services because they were actually helping with targeting for the Russians. So 3 young ladies in the Odessa region were acting as FSB agents. They were arrested by Ukraine. So we might find that some of their attacks on Odessa become much less targeted. However, that doesn't mean everything is going wonderful in Ukraine. People like to say that at different times that I don't tell the bad news about what's coming out of Ukraine, and I do. Here's one of them. Bureaucracy is preventing the allocation of funding to protect Ukraine's energy infrastructure, according to the media. They've got, I think, hundreds of millions of dollars that are available for repairing energy infrastructure, but their bureaucracy is slowing that down. That's not a good thing for Ukraine. Now, there could be reasons behind it. For one thing, everybody's on them about making sure that they don't have corruption going on. And so they might be having some safeguards put in place for that purpose. there's a lot of work that needs to be done as well. So either way, um, it's going to be a challenge to get those resources to the energy producers so that repairs can take place and their energy infrastructure can move forward. So this is not good news, but I could see why it might be happening. We'll have to see what happens. That said, like I said, I prefer to stick with the positive news, but in the end, the facts matter. And right now, the fact is that there is money being tied up in bureaucracy that they should be looking at ways to get out faster and accurately without any kind of corruption happening. So that's the situation there. Jerry and Lucille, thanks for joining in. Glad to see you today. And always glad to have you guys on board. So let's keep on going here. Let's see. Ukraine has been, actually, they're still under contract, as I understand, to transit Russian gas across their country to Europe. They're now negotiating with Azerbaijan to transit their gas across the nation instead, so that when that contract expires, and they absolutely will not renew it, they'll be able to have some of that gas still transiting through their pipelines to give them some money coming in, basically. Now, understand, once that's no longer Russian gas in those pipelines, the odds are the Russians are going to probably try to destroy them as well. So this may be short-lived, but overall, still, it looks like they're looking to make sure they are not reliant on Russia in the long term. Now, I don't like this headline because it's not absolutely clear. What the actual truth of what he said is, Kuleba says that if they can destroy Russia's bombers, this will halt Russia's advance on the battlefield. Right now, the Russians have their bombers outside of the area that the U.S. has allowed Ukraine to use their weapons in, and therefore they can take off. They can even drop their glide bombs, often from outside that area, and that will strike into Ukraine. And they're hard to track. They're hard to intercept, and it's just a mess. So Kuleba is saying if we can destroy those on the ground or in the air, it'll mean that Russia can't attack us near as much, and it will stop and halt and reverse Russia's advances. Russia claims a strike. Russia claims another strike on the Ukrainian Air Force base in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Not confirmed, at least as of the latest information I had from yesterday. The Russians claimed, I think it was one aircraft destroyed, but I don't have confirmation. That said, if they're claiming just one or even two, the odds are pretty good it's at least accurate enough. The strike may have taken place and they may have taken out an aircraft. The International Atomic Energy Agency has informed of an alleged drone strike on occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, with one of the substations now out of service. There have been talks of drones hitting or striking near the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. A substation would be just an electrical facility outside of the nuclear reactors and prevent them from sending power out of the facility. I don't believe they're using it for active electricity generation at this point in time. But either way, it's of concern. A drone apparently struck a substation nearby. France has boxed up 41 power generators to Kharkiv and Chernihiv Oblast there, I believe, amidst the energy infrastructure damage. They'll be able to stage these in positions where they can at least provide some power to Ukraine to keep things going. This is the energy infrastructure in Ukraine has been severely damaged, and we already know they're having to import more. In fact, Ukraine imports more electricity in June than in all of 2023. That's because Ukraine managed at various points to become a net exporter of power, even during 2023 at various points. But now that Russia has damaged so much of Ukraine's energy infrastructure, they're now not able to generate or distribute any potential excess power capacity outside of the country. So they're pulling in power, not exporting anymore. A Russian drone hit an infrastructure facility in the Chernihiv region, resulting in 6,000 consumers being left without electricity, so more energy infrastructure. But on the plus side, the third Patriot air defense system from Germany arrived in Ukraine. As the Defense of Ukraine states, we are grateful to our German partners for their unwavering support. Patriot systems help save innocent lives and critical infrastructure from Russian terror. Ukraine's new naval flagship, the Ada-class corvette Hetman Ivan Mazepa, is currently conducting workup operations off the coast of Turkey. Now, I don't think it's in a position to be transited into the Black Sea, but at least they're starting to build up a new naval capability that Ukraine will be able to use at least when the war is over. President Zelensky announced that they had 14 brigades that were all staged up. All they needed was the armaments to outfit them, and they'd have them ready to go. However, Western aid is arriving too slowly, and therefore they're not able to deploy these brigades in their full force. A little bit more details here. There are 14 under-equipped brigades without weapons. The approval for supplies of these weapons has already been voted on, but the delivery is proceeding very slowly. That's 14 brigades worth of men and equipment here. That would be if it was a U.S. Army Armored Brigade combat team. That'd be 3 battalions with 29 tanks each, 87 tanks per brigade, or 1,218 tanks for 14 brigades. Now, my assumption is that most of these are infantry or light armored brigades, not tank brigades. But they're saying that potentially they could use 1,218 tanks to outfit 14 brigades if they were all tank brigades. And of course, meanwhile, at the U.S. Sierra Army Depot, rows upon rows upon rows upon rows of unused M1 Abrams tanks of various modifications, paint jobs. So many of these may even be equipped with 105 millimeter guns instead of 120 millimeter guns, or variants that were used in Desert Storm or Desert Shield. These are sitting idle. Their whole purpose in life was to go and destroy Russian armor and equipment, and they're sitting idle in the U.S. instead. Of course, the Kremlin trolls didn't like Igor Sushko's post on the topic, and they are spamming the contents section of this post with arguments against sending more Abrams tanks to Ukraine. That is really indicative. It shows that if the Kremlin trolls are going after it that hard, it means there's real concern that they could actually be there. And they're really afraid of it. Now, Abrams tanks, when they get to Ukraine, they get up-armored with special cage armor to prevent drones from taking them out. Obviously, in combat, you're going to lose some of them no matter what you do. But the Ukrainians are really good about up-armoring that equipment and making it as drone-proof as possible. And generally speaking, the expectation, even with Abrams tanks, which are overweight, heavy tanks, if they could get a whole bunch of them over there, Ukraine could use them. Any big gun on a battlefield is better than no big guns on the battlefield. Let's go ahead and move over to what's going on in Russia. Ooh, it's really picked up. If you're hearing that wind, let me know. From the Ministry of Defense of the UK, their defense intelligence update, Ukrainian government sources have long highlighted Russian theft of Ukrainian resources from areas it has occupied. Iron ore, coal, titanium, uranium, manganese, gold, and lithium deposits are all present in Ukraine. Resources which are almost certainly coveted by Russia, but also potential targets as Russia seeks to grind down Ukraine's economy. denying access and destroying infrastructure. One of the reasons Russia seeks to improve transportation networks in occupied Ukraine is because it wants to extract more Ukrainian minerals. The Russian occupation official for Zaporizhzhia region previously claimed the ongoing upgrading and construction of road and rail transportation links to Russia would improve the lines of communications not only for the military logistics, but grain and mineral export. South of Dnipro, there we go, in Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia region, Russia continues its mining activity, removing iron ore by rail. Trains travel through Crimea over the Kerch Bridge into Russia. This activity is not without risk, as trains need to move through areas where Ukrainian partisans are known to operate and have already claimed responsibility for attacks. So Russia wants to strip as many resources from Ukraine as they can before they're kicked out, because they don't want Ukraine to gain the benefits of those resources, and they want to steal them first. Russia is basically a massive natural resources provider. They really don't have the big manufacturing capacity. So really they can make raw materials, but not fighting materials out of it in the bulk quantities needed to prosecute this war. Bear with me just a second here. There we go. So I'm trying to track the comments as I work here, so bear with me as I try and use my cell phone here to keep track of what you guys are saying. A Ukrainian drone hit a gunpowder plant in Russia. This would be the gunpowder plant in the town of Kotovsk in Russia's Tambov Oblast. So I've not gotten a good report on exactly how much damage was done. It may have just hit a workshop or one of the buildings there. But still, this is a vital military infrastructure plant that Ukraine would love to take out. Russia has issued arrest warrants for exiled journalists due to war coverage. This is how you know that the Russians are really intending to crush all dissent from top to bottom. Even the journalists who get out of the country, out of Russia, and go elsewhere are getting arrest warrants written up for them. I also do want to just state I am using my laptop for this. This is in preparation for leaving town in just another couple of days here. So some of this stuff is having to refresh as I go, rather than being just waiting like on my regular computer. So I think we're all getting all the weird things just into this week between last stream and the internet, the power outages and all that kind of stuff. So we're just got all kinds of weird things going on. A Ukrainian drone attack on July 1st, this is reporting back from a couple of days ago, seriously damaged the Oskol electrometallurgical plant in Belgorod Oblast. Now, that's another major infrastructure, war material, war production facility. Now, I mentioned the other day that Dagestan's got a whole bunch of crazy things going on over there. They had I think it was a terrorist attack over there, or something like it, if I remember correctly now. But they're now introducing special regimes or special rules to counter terrorism in that part of the country. The Muftiate of Dagestan announced on July 3rd that they would introduce a temporary ban on the wearing of niqabs following a terrorist attack in the Russian Republic in June that killed 22 people. That would be the Muslim head covering. That'll prevent the terrorists from hiding as women as they do their terrorist activities. Okay, this one's probably going to be a little bit off the screen here, but I think I'll get the basic of it. Russia struggles to control finances as Ukraine invasion spending soars. Now, this is from the Kyiv Independent, so you know there's going to be at least some bias in that direction. However, the Kyiv Independent is really good about controlling for that overall. So they will have a pro-Ukraine stance often, but the facts are usually really good in what they produce here. Since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine began in 2022, the Russian government has focused all of its financial resources on funding the war. As the war is the Kremlin's number one priority, all tools at its disposal have been used: increased taxation, sovereign funds, domestic borrowing, and the printing of money. This is causing real-world inflation to skyrocket in Russia. In fact, their mortgage interest rates up to 19.5%. This is not sustainable for Russia. This is the signs of an economy in trouble. Now, people love to say, well, Russians got this robust economy. It's not a problem at all. Yeah, it is a problem. Because the average Russian is now starting to see that they're not able to afford the basics of life. Not that they were necessarily able to before, but this is going to be a real problem for them. On top of that, Russia is taxing their economy heavily to try and pay for the war that they're carrying out. And every taxed dollar that's pulled out of the economy is one that does not generate new economic activity. That is what's going to truly bring down Russia's economy in the end. With all the young men going off to war from Russia, it looks like we've got there's a firefighter shortage. So residents of Belgorod will be given carts with water, shovels, and first aid kits to extinguish fires that are the result of shelling. 51 mobile fire extinguishing stations will be given to residents of border areas to independently extinguish fires after shelling. They'll include fire hoses, water supply systems, a shovel, a crowbar, and special clothing. It's basically a flatbed on wheels that can be transported to the side of the fire using a car or a tractor. So it's small, it's portable, and allows them to quickly fight a fire with basically untrained individuals, citizens of the area. To be honest, I think it's probably one of the better plans that Russia has. At least if you've got the equipment there, you can do something to fight a fire and potentially save both lives and infrastructure. Oh, gotta translate. I don't remember which one this one is. Oh, this is the Tambov gunpowder plant. Let's see. This is just a commentary that the governor stated they shot down a drone. But as they point out, if 2 drones were shot down, then why did one still land? It certainly doesn't look like a shot down drone. The authorities are lying again. The neighbor across the street's firing up his lawn tractor. I don't think it's going to be coming through on the audio too bad, but just be advised, that's one more thing we're going to be hearing today as I'm outside for today's stream. By the way, it is gorgeous out here. The weather is beautiful. Nice temperature, good breeze. I'm just really lucky today to have great weather for this. The Ukrainians managed to strike a military airfield in Primorsko-Atarsk in a night attack. The drones and at least 2 missiles attacked the region at night. 1 serviceman of the Russian armed forces was wounded. In addition to the airfield, an electrical substation was hit, causing power outages for some subscribers. Now, this is where the 960th Guards Attack Aviation Regiment, where they've got Su-25s of various types that they have stationed. No reports on whether they managed to hit any of the aircraft. Now, if you take a close look at this picture here, in the front you see these brand new, fancy, painted Russian-style row apartment buildings. Right behind this row is the rest of the much larger, destroyed Mariupol. Now, the Rostov employees were forbidden to show Mariupol from a bird's eye view, because then you'd see that the town is not being rebuilt. They're putting together a Potemkin village, showing off a fake for what they're redoing or rebuilding in Ukraine. A small piece of a very large bit of destroyed city. The Atesh movement, that's a partisan movement in Russia, reported it has stopped the operation of trains with North Korean ammunition near Russian Yekaterinburg. They conducted a successful operation on the Trans-Siberian Railroad near Yekaterinburg. As a result, the railroad track carrying North Korean munitions was blown up. And as they stated, we would like to remind you once again that the railroad will explode even more often as long as ammunition is transported along it. Those partisans are really on top of things. In other news, there were some attacks on the Rostov Oblast region. Where'd my translate go? Hang on a second, my translate's missing, so bear with me while I get this refreshed. There it is. Rostov-on-Don itself, they state, was attacked by a drone. There was a fire between Rostov and Bataisk. Got video evidence of it overall. Then they updated later, stating that 10 drones were shot down in the skies over the Rostov region by air defense forces. According to emergency services, as a result of the air attack and the fall of drone debris, landscape fires were recorded on the left bank of the Don and in the Azov region. Fire crews have left for the fire sites. According to preliminary information, there are no casualties. They're waiting on additional information. Much more footage from that drone attack. There is reports from the local residents that the local oil terminal is burning, but they've not been able to get official confirmation of that. Jason J. Smart just stated it straight up that the oil refinery was actually hit by a Ukrainian drone, liberating Ukraine by destroying Russia's oil industry one refinery at a time. And a Russian Mi-28 helicopter was shot down in the Rostov region of Russia. It was allegedly lifted into the air to intercept Ukrainian drones, but the phrasing is kind of weird. The helicopter reportedly just landed, and the grass underneath it caught fire due to the high engine temperature. So, was it shot down? Did it have a mechanical failure? Did they manage to light the grass on fire underneath and burn the helicopter out? Not really clear, but there was the loss of another Russian Mi-28 helicopter. It may have even taken a drone up the nose. We just don't know. Now on to the international front. Belarus has joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization led by Russia and China. They joined this on July 4th, according to the Russian state-owned TASS news agency. It doesn't surprise me that Belarus would do so. Belarus has been in China and Russia's orbit forever. I don't expect that's going to change. The U.S. announced another defense aid package for Ukraine worth $150 million. This is with presidential drawdown authority. Usually these are some of the more interesting packages here. In this case, they say that's ammunition for HIMARS, artillery rounds, and other critical capabilities drawn from U.S. stocks, according to the White House press secretary. Usually these presidential drawdown authorities have a lot more of the vital components that Ukraine needs right now, like 155 millimeter ammunition and HIMARS, and indicates that Ukraine is really aggressively using those stocks. NATO has agreed to commit 40 billion euros in military aid to Ukraine next year, according to Reuters. The Czech Republic has banned entry for Russians without biometric passports. That came into effect on July 3rd. I think overall we're just seeing that they want to make sure that any Russian they let in is who they say they are. Hi, cat. Sorry, you probably can't see the cat right here because I think she's just off camera. But she just jumped up on my table here where I'm working. Hi, Mushroom. Okay, now moving on. The U.S. has also allocated $2.2 billion from the congressionally approved assistance package which will be used to purchase missiles for the Patriot and NASAMS air defense systems for Ukraine. Some other things that were, now this is from the $150 million one. Some other things that were in it were 81 millimeter rounds, tow missiles, javelins, and AT-4 anti-armor systems, small arms, demolitions equipment, tactical vehicles, etc. President Zelensky declared that he was very grateful for the latest military aid package, including air defense assets, which they desperately need. Moving off the direct war information, but there was an absolute landslide victory for the Labour Party in the UK there. This is one of the, we would call them left-wing parties, I guess you might say, here in the US. The UK's been on kind of a right-wingish or slightly more conservative bent for a little while. And this looks like it's probably just their pendulum swinging back the other direction. This is very much the opposite of what happened in the rest of the European Union, which swung from pretty left-wing side more to the right. Not exactly hugely to the right, but either way, there's really no expectation that for the UK, there will be any change in foreign policy. In fact, they're not expecting any at all. But of course, somebody got a little bit of a picture here. You can see the new prime minister right there. Yes, that's a cat. But that was just one of the humorous things that happened as a result. Britain's new prime minister, Starmer, visited Kyiv, Irpin, and Bucha and met with President Zelensky. He said, there has to be justice in The Hague, and there has to be proper reparation in the rebuilding of Ukraine. So, stout declaration of support for Ukraine. Let's go ahead and move on to the front lines here. And we'll start off with the Institute for the Study of Wars report here. The interplay between ongoing Russian offensive operations in Chasiv Yar, Toretsk, and Avdiivka directions indicate that the Russian military command may intend to leverage the ongoing Toretsk push to create operational opportunities for advances in either Chasiv Yar or Avdiivka. Russian preparations that can support multiple future branch plans suggest a more developed level of operational planning and foresight than the Russian command has proven capable of executing thus far in the war since early 2022. The ability of this operational planning to come to fruition, however, will be bounded by the overall poor tactical level capabilities of Russian forces currently fighting in these areas. Translation: Russia may be finally learning how to walk and chew gum at the same time when it comes to their military activities. That's not necessarily good news for Ukraine. But there's also the fact that whether they can operationally pull together and carry out these plans will depend greatly on whether they've burned all of their Russian troops and equipment in not carrying out these plans. So overall, we've got an interesting combination there. Ukraine is addressing its manpower challenges and is forming several new brigades. That's the 14 I mentioned before. But delayed and insufficient Western weapons deliveries will likely prevent Ukraine from equipping all these new brigades. Timely and appropriate Western security assistance continues to be a crucial determinant of when and at what scale Ukrainian forces can contest the battlefield and initiative and conduct operationally significant counteroffensive operations in the future. Translation: if they can get the aid there fast, Ukraine could make great use of those 14 brigades. If they can't, then there's no guarantees one way or another they'll be able to make operational use of that equipment, of those brigades. Yeah, Ozzy, I'm sorry. How bad is the audio? I've got the lawnmower across the street is literally right across the street here. I'm just trying to get you that real wartime feel here. The deep state map has not updated in the last couple of days. Let's see if they've got a refresh as of right now. Yeah, the last information they updated was July 2nd. Okay, as long as you can hear all right, that's wonderful right there. Because if you can't hear, then I'm still point in continuing. Moving over to outside of Chasiv Yar, there's a canal district or canal neighborhood of Chasiv Yar. And basically, the Russians have flattened it. There's no standing structures to speak of, no place for the Ukrainians to hide. So they have had to pull out of that district. That means that Russia's been expending huge amounts of artillery and bombs and equipment to try and flatten this neighborhood so they can move through it, to the point where there's nothing left to defend. To give you a little bit of a hint here, here is the canal area, or the canal neighborhood of Chasiv Yar. You can see how little there's left that's actually standing. According to Forbes, since the start of the campaign to capture the city, Russian troops have already lost 99,000 people. More brutal fighting for territory is likely in Chasiv Yar as the Russians seek to expand their gains in one of the few places they are making any progress at all. And that's Forbes talking, not me. Now, Chasiv Yar is a city in the Bakhmut district with a population of about 17,000 people. I'm assuming 17,000 is their pre-war numbers. But I did catch another article that said that Russia has recruited 190,000 soldiers since the start of 2024. 190,000. And they've lost 99,000, according to Forbes, in this one area, this just to try to capture this one neighborhood. Now, obviously, they're probably adding up the people that have been part of this whole offensive in this area. So that's still 99,000 people. More than half of what they've recruited in 2024 has been lost in this attack getting to this canal neighborhood. That's not sustainable. Now, obviously, that's probably not dead. That's probably dead and wounded, a bunch of other factors. But still, 99,000 men to take a neighborhood that's not even the full city of Chasiv Yar. And the city of Chasiv Yar was only 17,000 to begin with. From the Kyiv Post, to kind of give you a feel for the front lines a bit, Russia offensive inexorably makes gains in eastern Donbass. By and large, we've seen this as the overall pattern. Small, tiny gains that are intended to, or they hope will look like, the inevitable march of Russian aggression, gradually taking nibble after nibble after nibble. So you can definitely see the potential there. But if they're really losing that many troops to take these small areas, these small nibbles, it's going to be impossible for Russia to sustain. This is what Chasiv Yar looked like in 2022 on the top and 2024 on the bottom. Not a whole lot remaining here as again, so they're currently fighting for the strategic advantage that Chasiv Yar has, which, as I recall, is in a relatively a high ground type position and a fairly significant logistics center. Forest fires have continued on the left bank of the occupied Kherson region, with Russian forces not being happy about that. They are not able to fight those fires, and if the forests are burned out, that gives them a lot less places to actually hide away from Ukrainian forces. A little bit more maps here on the Toretsk axis, which we talked about earlier. Newly geolocated footage confirms Russian advances along the railway tracks towards Druzhba. They have increased their pace and amount of attacks in this area. So small amounts of territory, again, nibbles. Little nibbles. New York is currently under pressure from the Russians. No, they wish it was that New York, but no, this is New York in Ukraine. In recent days, there was a lot of chatter about New York. Russian forces would have advanced close to the southern outskirts, but no visual confirmation, and they're currently reporting that area as a gray zone. This is part of the overall advance or control of Sokol, with Russian forces having advanced further towards Lozovatsky. They do say that no report states that Russian forces are advancing at a higher pace again, but again, it looks like they're mostly occupying open territory that's relatively easy to capture. And that's the situation on the front lines. Let's go ahead and dip into the interesting extras, though I do see that there's some comments here. Lucille states that it's sad that Russia has lost so many in this war. They had no justification to begin. Even more sorrowful that Ukraine is also losing many as well. Al states, remember, it's not just the loss of physical bodies. Think of all the lost equipment those men had. That's a lot of gear they don't have the ability to restock in a timely manner. Absolutely correct. And Ozzy states, when Russia pulled back from Kyiv and the north, I honestly thought they would concentrate and go fast elsewhere. Here we are 2 years later. Small Russian gains. Surprised. That's the fundamental problem there. That is the issue that Russia is having, is that they're unable to effectively make the most of their tactical potential. They're not able to capitalize on the opportunities that they create. There have been several points in this war where if Russia had had the right troops in the right place at the right time, they could have punched through Ukrainian lines and just literally run roughshod over the rear areas, taking vast swaths of territory. But they're never able to capitalize it because they're never able to have the right men, the right equipment, and the right stuff in the right places. So overall, that's kind of the story of Russia right now. Okay, I have to pause for a moment. That is a song playing in the bells. I can't even hear myself think right now. All right, there we go. Let's go ahead and continue on here. The sabotage of the Russian vessel in Kaliningrad Oblast in April, that was part of the joint operation of the Freedom of Russian Legion. This was a major operation by Russian partisans that managed to turn a Russian officer. He burned out the control systems and vital equipment of this ship in Kaliningrad. Quite interesting to see how far the partisan operations have managed to carry out operations in Russian territory, even in places like Kaliningrad. Now, this is just crazy. This is a Meta CEO, Mark Zuckerberg. He is a surf diplomat, absolutely freaking out about it, yelling about the Americans having Guantanamo Bay and all this kind of stuff. But the Chinese are working on real spy operations based out of Cuba, and they're building the bases to do it. The thing is that we're going to have to start watching our backs here, and very carefully. And we'll end off with this little short video here. Let me bring this back here. Start over. Another Ukrainian soldier and his Ukrainian military. I am always amazed by how much the Ukrainians take care of and love their enemies. It just shows a lot about who they are deep inside. And on that note, I think that's everything for today. Thank you very much for joining me. Always glad to have you here. I do appreciate your comments. Loved every one of them. Absolutely appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, Luciano, born in the USA. Ozzy stating, happy birthday, America. Absolutely love it. I appreciate everything you do. And I realize that not everybody who watches is from the United States of America. I feel very blessed to be born to goodly parents in this great country. The U.S. isn't perfect. I think we can determine that just based on all the various videos that I put out on my own channel. But you know what? It's amazing. And I love it from the deepest parts of it. So very And on that note, you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next video.